In a democratic country like Ecuador, when you vote a man in who runs on a certain campaign platform and he doesn't keep it, he goes against everything he ran on, democracy demands that you throw him out of office. Why don't you guys do the same thing? I don't know. I said, maybe we're not a democracy. So, all over South America, this is what's going on now. And we're seeing the repercussions in many countries, actually. And what I want to say to you is, put yourself in the position of that president. Imagine if you had run on a campaign that you deeply believe in, of keeping down the corporatocracy, of using your country's resources to help your people, and you're voted in, and somebody walks into your office and says something like that to you. Now, that's usually said more subtly. It's not quite as dramatic as I put it, but because I've said that to people like that. And what we really say at that point is, hey, remember what happened to Arbenz of Guatemala? Remember what happened to Allende of Chile? Remember what happened to Roldos? Remember what happened to Lumumba in the Congo? Remember what happened to Diem in Vietnam? Remember what happened to Torrijos? Remember what happened to Noriega? Remember, remember, remember. They get the message. What would you do if you'd just been elected president of one of these countries and someone like me walks into your office and gives you this ultimatum? Here's a lot of money for you and your family, or we can throw you out of office. And you know damn well that if you get thrown out of office or assassinated, the next guy is going to be scared shitless. What's he going to do? So what are you going to do when that happens? What would you do? It's a hard question to answer, isn't it? So what has to happen here is it's you and me who have to do something. It's us here in this country. We can't let that happen anymore. We must defend democracy. And even if we don't like what those democratically elected presidents are saying, and I don't like what some of them are saying, I'm not a real big fan of some of those presidents and their economic policies, I got to tell you that. But I 100% support them as long as they're elected democratically. And most every one of them has been elected by a much greater majority with a much greater percentage of their population voting than happened in this country. They are truly democratically elected presidents. And I don't care what CNN says about, or Fox or anybody else about Chavez. He has won plurality after plurality after vote. He keeps winning. And so we must send a message to our government and to our corporations, to the corporatocracy, that they have to respect democracy. Not just any president, whether he's a democratically elected president or a dictator who happens to support our corporate policies. We must stand behind our principles. One of the other things that's happened in the history of this country during my lifetime, as we've built this empire, is that we have managed to subjugate, to put aside, to sweep under the rug every principle that I grew up believing was what makes America great. And we need to turn that around. The very things that you all joined the military to fight to support, we've managed to subjugate, and we need to change that. So let's talk about how we can do that. Let's move on to the good news. And again, the good news is we know we live on a very, very small planet. We know we have all the resources we need to make this a better world, and that the only way our children are going to grow up safe, secure, and in a sustainable world is that if every child in the world has that opportunity. Right now, we represent 5% of the world's population. We consume over 25% of its resources and create more than 30% of its pollution. And the only thing you can say about a system like that is it is a failure. You cannot take that system to India or China or Africa or South America. It doesn't work. Do the math. 5% of the world's population consuming 25% of its resources and contributing over 30% of its pollution. That is a failed system. We have to change it. We know from history that empires never survive. They always collapse. And when they collapse, a void is created and more wars happen. And then a new empire emerges, which usually isn't any better than the last and could be an awful lot worse. I sure don't want to see my daughter have to wear a veil. I'm not looking to have the Chinese run my country or anybody else. What we must do this time is something that's never been done in history before. We must turn this empire into something new, something different. We must create a new model. So let's not watch the empire collapse. Let's instead transform it. Let's transform it into something that represents the ideals that our founding fathers envisioned when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, and that so many men and women over the centuries have died for in defending. So many of your brothers and sisters in the military have died to defend those principles. So let's turn this country into something that truly represents those principles and take that out to the world as a model. The way we can do this, and the way we must do this, is to go after the power base of the corporatocracy. Please continue working in politics, those of you who do. Continue moving in that avenue, but recognize that unless we change these corporations, that only has some limited benefits. If we want to really change the system, we've got to go after the emperor. And the emperor is not in politics. The emperor is controlling the money. That's the big corporations. These corporations today have one goal, and that goal is to make a few rich men a lot richer. We need to change that so that the goal now becomes one of primarily serving all the employees, even after retirement, through health benefits, etc. Serving their customers, of course. Serving their customers and also serving the people who provide the raw materials that go into those corporations, whether those people live in Ethiopia or in Indonesia or in Uruguay. Taking care of the people that provide the resources and taking care of all the communities and the environments where all of these people live. In other words, these corporations need to become good citizens. They need to become good moral communities. They are our main communities. Most of us look at a globe of the earth and we see all these countries outlined on it, about 200 of them, slightly less, and many of those countries were created by us, by the colonial powers, sort of arbitrarily. But most of those countries don't really impact any other countries, with some obvious exceptions like us. But most of them don't impact other countries. And in any case, thinking of that globe as the geopolitics of this planet is archaic. The real geopolitics of this planet could better be viewed as a bunch of huge clouds that move around this planet, and those clouds are the big corporations. And they really run the geopolitics of this planet. Of the 100 largest economies in the world, 51 are corporations, not governments, and 47 of those are US based. These are the entities that control the planet. And so we must change those corporations. We must bring them around. They will tell you, and all of our governments will tell you, that every country out there that we're working with ought to be a democracy and ought to be transparent. And I think that's a pretty good idea. But what about the corporations? Every corporation should be democratic and transparent. What we have today is what I call imperialistic capitalism, where a few men make all the decisions and most all the money. What we need to move into is democratic capitalism, which will be much more egalitarian, which in fact represents what our Declaration of Independence called upon.